Welcome. Welcome. We will give it a minute or so to get started for folks to join. If you're here, please say hello in the chat so that we can see that you can see and hear the three of us. Whether you're joining us live or you're watching this in a replay because you registered and weren't able to join, hello, thank you for coming. We have a good hour ready for you guys, and we're really excited about this topic. Okay, we will give this just until about 11:01, and we will get started with our content. Okay. I'm seeing all these hellos. That's good. It means people are here, and we're not just screaming into the void. Okay, it is 11:01, so we are going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at Building a Federal BD Pipeline, GovCon's most important collateral, with the Pulse of GovCon and Crossroads Capital. Just a quick introduction on who you're going to be listening to today. My name is Lisa Shaymont. That's my partner, Amber Hart. We are the Pulse of Government Contracting. We are a boutique federal market intelligence firm that specializes in GovCon storytelling. Our company has three aspects to our business. We have a market intelligence membership platform. We offer federal consulting on BD and proposals, and we offer training like today. With us, we are proud to have Richard Phillips as one of our co-presenters today. He is a senior partner of Crossroads Capital, LLC. He founded the boutique market and M&A advisory firm to better serve companies in the middle market with actionable, data-driven intelligence to make better strategic decisions. So Richard came to us and was talking about the M&A aspect and how a lot of companies out there don't know how to properly build and maintain opportunity pipelines, and specifically don't know why that is so important in M&A, in the diligence process. So welcome, Richard. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into it because we like presentations that focus on the content and not necessarily the people that are here talking to you today. So why are we here? Why are you here? We are here because federal opportunity pipelines are the lifeblood of government contracting firms. Without them, these companies would simply cease to exist. They would evaporate. And the way that you maintain your contract pipeline is to have some semblance of a tool that signifies your organization's plan for strategic development. But it also has to demonstrate how to effectively and efficiently your client portfolios are maintained and managed. So a pipeline is this idea of the potential revenue for your company. It's the opportunities that you're tracking. It's the clients that you're going to be working with, the customers that you're going to be reaching out to. It is everything that you're going to go through in terms of the bid and proposal process. It's the opportunities that you are tracking as potential contracts for your firm. So today we're going to be going over what a pipeline is, how to maintain it, how to optimize your pipeline, and then why it's important from an M&A side of the house as well. So what is a federal pipeline? I mentioned before, it's a tool. It's a visual way of tracking multiple government contracting opportunities and their potential buyers through the different stages of your sales process. So it's all about how to identify potential opportunities and buyers that are relevant to your organization's capabilities and sales efforts. Now, that idea of relevance, we're going to be harping on a lot today too, because what a pipeline isn't is just a laundry list of potential opportunities that are out there. They really have to resonate, to jive with your company, with your strategy in order to best position your firm. We're going to get into this. So I'm not going to give any spoilers, but spoiler alert, GWAC's not necessarily belonging in your pipeline. Just because it's out there and people are talking about it doesn't mean that it resonates with your company's position. It's all about developing and maintaining relationships with federal buyers and industry. Pipelines can also be used to enact a customer communication and call plan so that you can see what buyers are out there that are buying what you're selling. It can also be about your relationship with industry for teaming. It's just this whole research tool in order to track this information and these people. It's supposed to drive your customer engagements and your sales strategies. And it's supposed to assist in shaping opportunities by tracking the responses that you do to things like market research, RFIs. When I say assisting in shaping opportunities, if there's anything pre-solicitation that you've been tracking, that's a really good follow-up for your customer communication plans. And it is also all about communicating your value to potential buyers. And that's where the M&A side of the house is going to come into play today. So for the M&A, I'm going to toss this over to you, Richard, who's going to be talking about why pipelines are such a crucial component of diligence.
Thank you, Lisa. And when the first two items I ask for, or people ask for, whether private equity shops, your M&A advisor, or whomever, you're talking to your company from a strategic planning standpoint. Where is the contract waterfall? What does it look like? And then, somewhat related to that, show me a pipeline, a detailed, articulated pipeline. And I always find I'm rather surprised how folks aren't really prepared for this kind of thing. And what I find often, and what we find in the marketplace from other participants, folks not being ready. Um, and when a buyer when a buyer or an advisor like us will ask for these things and they're not at the ready, it gives us a sense of, okay, how sophisticated the organization is, or lack thereof. It makes a good first impression. And sometimes what we find with these, if they do have pipelines in place, they will, what I found, they will sometimes have a contradictory narrative to what the strategic story of the company is, whether it be on their website, whether it be in their collateral presentations, things of that matter. And then another sometimes attribute we see, and it's not a positive one, and Lisa alluded to it a little bit, is the kitchen sink. They throw everything in there unrelated, just run up the score, put as many opportunities in there, more the better, with no rhyme or reason to why they're in there, kind of haphazardly, and it doesn't give a sense of vision, strategy, and it just looks like it was thrown together. And so it's an important item. It's probably the top one or two things a buyer or a strategic partner or teaming partner, a financing organization, whether you're getting commercial bank financing or what have you, will look at and ask for, because it gives a sense of where the company's going. And also if it should dovetail well with the contract waterfall. And if they're linked properly, you can make good forecasts and get a sense of where your company is today financially and will be in the future.
So, Richard, for our folks out there that might be new to some of these terms, we talk about pipeline as being more about opportunities. Can you define a contract waterfall for everybody out there?
Sure. So the contract waterfall, think about it as your pipeline, that the things you've won already, the things that you're working on, the workflow that you're getting, and how they kind of link in many ways is the recompetes on your waterfall will be in your pipeline. And so it's the work you've won, the work you're doing, and so it's a measure of your past performance, but also your current workload and current capacity. The pipeline is related to that insofar as, okay, here's what you're working on, and it should rhyme and connect in many ways to what you're going to bid on in the future, right? Because you got your recompetes and work based on that past performance that in your waterfall should be things that tend to be in your pipeline. So waterfall is really the contract work that you're doing with 3-5 years in the future, and that in waterfall is as that time goes out, as that contract wears out, hence the waterfall. But the pipeline is the new work that you're looking to bid on.
Love it. It's funny to think about all this in terms of water too. Waterfall, pipeline. We're very creative industry.
So and this next slide speaks to how this fits into when I look at a company or a buyer or a financing organization or anybody else, strategic partner. Is this company a lifestyle company, or is it more, for lack of a better term, corporate minded, institutionalized? And a lifestyle company will be less sophisticated, will get less of a value. Nothing wrong with having a lifestyle company, but I think the important takeaway here is to understand what you are, and not thinking operating, having the attributes of a lifestyle company, thinking you're an institutionalized company that's going to be in the high range of your multiples. And here is and I won't read through them all, but it's a matter of sophistication, corporate infrastructure, corporate minded. You don't have to necessarily be corporate minded, quote unquote. You don't have to be there yet, but you have to start to show those attributes and have that vision. And you could see that in pipeline. This is how it's linked to pipeline. The better, the more thought out and the more detailed and articulated your pipeline is, speaks to the difference between a lifestyle company and a corporate minded company. Even a lifestyle company might have a lot of, for instance, restricted work in its pipeline, and not full and open. But in a corporate-minded, institutionalized company, even if you are 8A or you're doing small business set-aside work, you will start to see that transformation read into that pipeline. You could read strategy if they're done well, and that transition and evolution to more of a full and open workload, contract load, and contract mix. You could read into it, and so. When I tell companies all the time, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, if it's all cooked into that company, that has very little value to a buyer. The more you could hand off a owner's manual to the next person who's going to take it over, those companies will be attractive. Those companies will be more valuable. And so as you're doing that transition from a lifestyle to a corporate-minded institution and company, be mindful of the fact that the more you could sort of take yourself out of the equation in a sense and institutionalize yourself, the more valuable you will be, the more you will attract and retain, I think, talent, financing, and strategic partners.
Richard, this is funny. We see this a lot, Amber and I, in what we work on. There's a lot of lifestyle companies in government contracting. That's no secret. A lot of small businesses, organizations are, and you're right, it does connect to pipeline, because a lot of lifestyle companies that we see, the small business owner goes, well, the pipeline's in my head, and that's all well and good for just your daily operations and what you need to do to continue, moving the bus. But if you can't pass that on, that's why we're going to be talking about how to build a pipeline, how to standardize a process, and how to leverage this tool to make your company more successful.
Yes, and this speaks to this next slide. Thank you. Speaks to how you move across the spectrum. At the far end, you're a lifestyle company. Very few buyers, less sophisticated buyers. You're a smaller company, necessarily. It may not make even sense to run an auction or to have run a sell side process. But as you move up the chain, you're starting to be more of you're telling more of a story. You have more buyers, you have more options, you have, depending on the size, there's more opportunities, whether you may perhaps going public, perhaps selling to a big private equity. Your options for exit and your valuation at exit expand as you move up above, up across this cloud or this bubble, wherever you want to call it, across this spectrum. And so as you move across, there's more buyers, more sophisticated buyers, and more value to the company that you're looking to exit or just build.
This is really important.
Yeah, I actually have a question on this about, I see the value to market access, right, and past performance. And I know we're going to get to a little bit of how things are weighted in a pipeline later in our presentation. But the question that always stands out to me is, the market access, right? Is that, when you refer to market access, is it better to be more of a federal agency focused, or is it to be more of a kind of verticals by functional area focused? Which one provides more value, or does it really depend on the company?
From a standpoint of, if I'm on the sell side of a deal, right, what I want to see is, diversification is great, but I want to, if it's a mile wide and an inch deep, that's not, that doesn't show me a lot of staying power. And so that I might think that may not resonate well in the marketplace and command higher multiples. So I think, I think from a standpoint, you want to be able to show real deep capability, and to the extent that you could show it within an agency, various contracts, and I mentioned this before to Lisa. We were exchanging emails right before this. You want contract diversity in some ways more than you want agency diversity, because it looks like you're all things to all people, and how sophisticated or deep dive of capabilities are unique there, right? So. Perhaps, and this is sort of a punt on your question, Amber, but You know, I think you want to be. I always find, and this is maybe just Wall Street not using its brain, but you know, pure plays seem to make more sense. There is an easier story to tell there, and if it's based on a capability or a solution set, or you know, that is an easier story to tell, and it will resonate in the marketplace better. But one that's disjointed a little bit is perhaps harder to tell. It doesn't mean the company doesn't have value. It's just harder to tell that story and harder for that to resonate with market players who don't have a lot of attention span, perhaps. So I think I've circled around your question, but is that?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, right? I think the answer is, if you're gonna, whatever path you choose, right, make sure that you have staying power in it, right? That you're not just dabbling. That if you're trying to sell a capability or relationship, right, that you have established yourself there.
Because that proves recurring revenue streams, and that's what people want to see. And it shows staying power, stickiness, and loyalty to those customers, because you've been, you know, that past performance is embedded, and that means you can go into adjacent areas. But if the areas are really wide, you know, it might be diversified, but it's not. Once again, it's a mile wide and an inch deep, and doesn't show staying power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really important, and you should consider that when building out your pipeline. And I do think it's okay. So what I'm hearing, and I know that you're not giving a hard and fast answer, but what I've definitely heard in the market before is that it's more appealing to have pipelines and to just have contracts focusing within specific agency sets. It's easier if you were to sell your company to pick that up and put that into another larger company, because that's how a lot of larger firms are structured. So that way you could be easily picked up and just merged into that. That being said, if you're a small business and you're building a pipeline and you just need to start getting some prime work, don't limit yourself, because that's something we build pipelines for people all the time. And we will typically give a lot of different agency sets to look at, because then you can focus your communications plan and you can see where you can not only get a prime contract, but then also build out from there. And it's about those relationships that you make more than just, you know, having a perfect pipeline.
And so this speaks to what it just shows in a slightly different way, maybe more numerical way. But as you move up this evaluation ladder, and you start to demonstrate these more in-demand, attractive qualities, you're going to command higher multiples. And you can see what some of those are. I won't read all of them. But you know, as you move from more full and open work, more scale, you know, more prime work, more full and open work, better margins, better corporate infrastructure that comes along with that, you're going to command higher multiples. Being in the better agencies, and those just tend to be more, you know, where there's more full and open work, and it's more competitive work, but still more nuanced, right? And so once you're in those agencies, because you know the past performance and specialized capability, you could stay there. So once again, the more of these attributes you show, the higher multiples you'll get. And you could see, once again, read these things into pipeline. Read these things, you know, you could see these in your company today, right? And the work you're doing, what you have there, corporate infrastructure. But, you know, think about these also, especially in the conversation we're having today, in terms of how does this, you know, what does this look like in your pipeline on this ladder, right? That work, is it in the higher end of that ladder, or is it the lower end? Because this is what you're growing to be, right? You want to move up the ladder. You know, even if you want to be a lifestyle company, you still want to try to move up the ladder to the extent you can, and it's possible. So think about this also where your company is today, but also read these attributes into your pipeline as well.
Right. Hey, so Richard, just a quick question for our newbies. EBITDA. What's EBITDA?
EBITDA, think of it as a proxy for cash flow. What it stands for is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And you know, companies in the GovCon's space, there's not a lot of because they don't have factories, they don't have a lot of fixed assets. So think of it, if you just want to think of it as a proxy for free cash flow, it's probably pretty close to it. But the acronym is thrown around, but think of it as, or very simply just profit. So.
I'm impressed that you knew what EBITDA stood for. That's what people say. They just say EBITDA.
I was like, it's a fun word to say, EBITDA. But I would never know what it means. I see it, it's like you see it on these slides or you see it in these presentations and you have no idea, but that's impressive, especially in a world of acronyms. We had another question too, Richard, kind of to put you on the spot from one of our attendees. I know in the last slide, right, I kind of asked, is it agency specific, right, as a vertical, or is it functional area as a vertical? And
no, yeah.
But the question that we got was, what is considered the better agencies, right? Is there considered an agency with better staying power that's seen as a more consistent focus area, right?
No, absolutely. And I look, and I'm generalizing here, but the DoD, the parts of DHS, there's parts of DOE that have specific needs. So yeah, I would think by functional area. I guess you're forcing me to an answer, and I'm glad because we revisited this. So I would say by function maybe is an easier story to tell, and that might be multiple agency. But once again, you could there's a narrative there that makes sense that people can will make sense to folks and they'll get it. And so I think functional area is a good way to think of these things because and yeah, certain agencies will have that more. They tend to be more in DoD than in federal civilian, but there's part of federal civilian areas that DOE is one of those, parts of DHS.
HHS, I'm sure right now. Right?
Oh yeah, I mean certainly that's the demand. Supply chain, things related to supply chain management and hardening that critical infrastructure. Those things are hot issues and hot where the government's going to be spending money. So it's. So yeah, to generalize, DoD intelligence community is going to have more of that, but it doesn't mean that's the only place. And there's pockets in the federal civilian space. DOE is certainly one of them. Parts of Treasury, where there's cyber needs there that are as sophisticated as anywhere in the government. So it's once again making some generalizations, but I think I get a sense of where that might be.
Yeah. Have you seen a trend on, maybe the past year, other than DoD, an agency that's been a target more than most that surprised you?
Not that surprised me. I mean, I'm always, an agency that you could say that punches above its weight, and DOE, right? Because of the nuclear aspects and sort of the cybersecurity issues related and critical infrastructure and supply chain things. Involved.
Right. The artificial intelligence that they're really getting into there.
Yeah. And so those agencies, they could be more nimble in some ways, and so can deploy maybe more on the edge kind of solutions. And maybe I'm not using the right term there, but yeah, I haven't. It's funny over the last 2 years, when we do these statistics, and maybe I've shared them with you guys in the past, that not a lot has changed as far as what folks are looking for. Now that might change as we're getting into new administrations and the spend priorities change slightly. But it really, COVID and all the rest, I'm looking at, when we were looking at our deal statistics, they haven't changed that much. I mean, certainly it's probably more, you could imagine intuitively HHS has more, but you haven't seen it necessarily in deal statistics because, it takes you 6 months from soup to nuts to get a deal done. So, it's a lag. There's certainly a lag there. And it might be very apparent next year, but it's not apparent now. So this here is just to get a sense of this diligence spectrum, and I don't want to spend much time here, but in a pipeline there's something that really needs to be diligence, right? It's future earnings, the quality of those earnings, and the quality of the work that you're doing, and recompete risk and all the rest. And so they'll look at your pipeline and so in your waterfall, but your pipeline will be one of the more really examined items there, and you'll want to have to be able to defend we'll get into in a minute, your P-win rates and what your CPARs are in those areas. And that's where people are going to spend their time, effort, and thinking. And some of these things people can get over. It's a check the box diligence. Some are more, can be more of deal breakers or things that cause you to retrade the deal, reprice it, if you will, because or structure it differently with earnout and contingent deferred arrangements because of the uncertainty of some of that, what's in the pipeline. And so quality of pipeline will make this spectrum look a lot, you move more towards the blue-gray area if you can do it right. And I kind of touched on this too. So, once again, compelling. I always say that to make it for a deal to get a lot of interest, you need three components: compelling narrative, and I'll tie them into pipeline, right? Compelling narrative, which can be, the key document to that is a pipeline. Really, is the pipeline match the story you're telling, strategic value proposition of the company, and also your growth story and your corporate development story. And that will, if done right, you will create a large and discerning buyer pool that will be, and then once you have that, you can create urgency and competition amongst those buyers. And those three components will get your deal done and at an optimal valuation based on what you have and and making a case to those folks. But you really got to start with that compelling narrative to get that initial interest, to get people to open up the book, if you will, and take a look deeper.
Thank you, Richard. So now we're going to be talking about how to build that narrative by creating a federal pipeline. So this is where Amber and I are really going to come into play today to talk about our 5 tips on how to create a sales pipeline. We're going to discuss how to determine the front of your funnel, how to design it around a usable format, how to match it to your company's capabilities, how to populate it through online research, and then finally, we're going to talk about maintenance of your sales pipeline. So let's get into the nitty-gritty, the logistics of what this looks like. First piece of advice that we give people is this idea of a front of funnel for your pipeline. And this will change based on your needs, based on your company, your strategy, your build-up, how many people you are, really on so many things. So when we say front of funnel, we mean very literally, if you had a funnel, the widest part of the funnel mouth, what is going to be the first thing that you catch in that funnel? Some people, it's time frame. Some people say, I want to make sure, I want to look at all opportunities just across the entire landscape between, the next 6 months. Others is all about value. We've seen some companies that they like what they refer to as the low-hanging fruit. So they just want to see what opportunities are out there for maybe like 10K, 40K. And others say, we're not even going to bother with anything under 10 million. Really just depends. For a lot of folks, it is agency. That's what we see most often. And for the reasons that Richard had discussed before. So this would be, I want to see everything that's coming out under Navy. I want to see everything that's coming out under DOJ, just to get a sense if those are one of your customers on what they are currently procuring. Some folks, it's functional areas, especially if you're starting out and you're trying to build past performance and you say, I do this one functional area really, really well. And so I just want to try to sell this to the government. We see that with a lot of new companies that are entering the market. That are maybe on the commercial side. We're working right now with a firm that does textiles and fashion materials. And so for right now, masks are a hot item. And they're saying, hey, let's get into the government and, we'll sell these masks to whoever needs it. In that case, their functional areas, since it is such a niche thing that they provide, would be the front of funnel for their pipeline. And others like to specify by the NAICS and the PSC code. So it really just depends on your company, the size, and your needs for a pipeline.
Right. Anything what your story is, as Richard brought out, right? This is where you start the baseline of your story. What's your company going to be focusing on? What is the intent, right? What is the driver of your company? And it could be any one of those, including, the dollar values, right? And looking at or the periods of performance. Things like that, so whatever it is that drives your company and what's going to be, your baseline for your story, that's your front of funnel.
Absolutely. After you have the front of funnel just determined in your head, it's time to think about the organization of the pipeline in a usable format. So an issue that we see with especially a lot of small companies is they'll take somebody else's pipeline template and they'll just start from there. We're going to show you what a notional pipeline could look like. Richard actually helped us with the types of fields that, from an M&A perspective, people would want to see. So if you are building a pipeline because you have the intention to eventually sell or get, private equity or other sort of funding in that way, your pipeline will look different than, say, a really, really large company that has a bunch of different, sectors within it versus somebody that's really, really niche. So don't just take somebody's template. You should customize it. You should do it in a usable format for yourself. Like if you know that you hyper focus on solicitation numbers or date ranges, if that's really important to you, put that on the left side, because we read left to right. It's those kind of things that you really have to consider. What order should the information appear? What is going to help you when it comes to vetting what's in your pipeline? What do you need to see first, especially, or your boss? What do they need to see first? That's what a lot of this comes down to also. A lot of firms will have business development analysts that are maybe a little more junior, whose roles and responsibilities include populating this pipeline, finding new opportunities, really doing the sourcing part. And then it will be up to their boss, to the owner of the small business, to the capture manager, to the portfolio manager to run through it and vet them. So make sure that it's in a format where they can easily go, they'll see something right away that goes, no, this is not right for us. Or, oh, this is intriguing. This is exactly what we're looking for.
Right, Lisa. And as Richard brought up, God forbid you were to get hit by a bus, you want to make sure that your pipeline isn't in your own language that only you can understand. You want to make sure that you're at least, that if you are using certain acronyms, that you define them within your, whatever you're using, right? If you're using certain code words or color codes or whatever you use, you want to make sure all of that's defined, because if someone else needs to take over that pipeline, or say you start bringing more people in to manage that pipeline, you may have created your own process, but that process now needs to spread across, the other people in your organization. So you need to make sure whatever process you're using, that it's always defined.
Absolutely. Then when you have opportunities in your pipeline, you have to make sure that they each match to your company's capabilities. You have to ensure that they are realistic for you guys. And so this is going to go beyond just matching the NAICS or PSC codes and even keyword searches. So we're going to get up on our soapbox for a hot second here. Something that especially small businesses do that is a disservice to themselves is to focus really heavily on some of these codes and some of these key words. Just because, the contract has, let's take masks, for example, since we are in the middle of a pandemic still, or the tail end of a pandemic still. If you were just to search for opportunities where mask is in the contract name, you could possibly be missing out on a lot of other opportunities, because that's just not necessarily how the government works, especially right now. There is so much combining services within these contracts where you could potentially, perform a small component of a larger contract, and then that would open it up to teaming opportunities for you. PSC and NAICS codes are also great, but not necessarily fully indicative of what the contract is about.
Yeah. And Lisa, to add on to that point, they're also hand chosen by that contracting officer or by whatever point of contact on the federal side is working. These things are not automatically, there's no computer yet that scans the whole thing and is like, here's what we recommend as your NAICS code or your PSC code. These things are chosen by humans. So it's how that human is behaving that day, how they feel that day, how tired their brain is from that day, what they've been working on for that day, right? That's all chosen by a human. So sometimes going by NAICS or PSC codes isn't, your silver bullet. And also, I have a great example. I actually was looking at an RFI that came out of DHS just the other day for IT PMO support services. And within this statement of work, they were talking, and it's like test engineering and everything that you would think would maybe be in there. It's not just program management, but it's like red teaming. It's the kitchen sink all into one. But there's also things about webinar content creation, which is like, what? And things like that. So, that's, if you're just searching for content creation, you might miss that if that's your repertoire, right? And so, Lisa, we got asked a question of, can we provide recommendations on the qualifications of leads that hit the front of funnel, right? What else should you be looking at? I know for me, it's always, do you match the no-go criteria, right? Do you have the certs? Do you have the accounting that they're asking for? And it's also past performance. To me, those are yours. Do you have any other recommendations?
Past performance is definitely huge. How long the time frame is between release and submittal is also really big. whether or not you have the internal infrastructure to go after them. That's another thing. Pipeline's all well and good, but if you can't actually put together the RFI or the proposal, then it doesn't do you any good. So you have to think about your internal organization as well. The go, no go, any sort of bid, no bid sort of vetting performance that you do, that's company by company. It depends on how much risk you want to undertake. You know, we can't tell you what to do there. I would encourage that the biggest part of a go, no go, bid, no bid would be to read the documentation that they submit. You'd be surprised. A lot of people are like, well, on face value, looking at the value of the contract, looking at who it's for, and the capabilities that they need, the requirements, we can absolutely meet it. That's great, but you also need to be able to meet the requirements of the proposal. And I've had some people come to us with a proposal going, this is right in our wheelhouse. Oh my gosh, this is made for us. It's made for us. And I start going through and I put together the data calls and I got the templates. And I'm like, okay, we need 3 past performance references within the last 5 years under a federal customer. And they say, well, we don't have that. And I said, well, you need that to submit a proposal. This should not be in your pipeline. You cannot meet even the requirements to bid, let alone the requirements to perform. That's a long-winded way of saying the requirements to bid is a huge component.
Make sure you can be compliant before you decide if you're the most compelling bidder.
There we go. Yes. So that's some options there. After that, you have to populate the dang thing. We've talked about the format. We've talked about where to start. Now you actually have to do the online research to populate it. And this, it might hurt people. This does not mean GovWin. This does not mean your commercial firms. Can those help populate a pipeline? Yes, absolutely. There is a reason that they exist. They definitely do a good job of diving into things like historical data and spending. And there's a bunch of different, interpretations of when things are going to happen. Don't take it as law, but they're there and they're helpful. This is going through and finding opportunities that aren't in the super hyper obvious spaces. To start with the obvious, just because you have to, beta.sam.gov, we know it, we love it. That is the official way that the government will communicate open requirements for bid. But then there's other ones like grants.gov. Well, Lisa, I'm not a not-for-profit. Okay, you don't always have to be. Grants.gov has a lot of federal buyers there. It's a great option, especially for small businesses. Check it out. Same with challenges.gov. Definitely great, especially if you're in kind of the research and development field. You do prototyping. eBuy, GSA schedules. They're great places if you have them. If you don't have a GSA schedule, that's not to be included in your pipeline. That's something I want to pull back on right now. GSA schedule does not count as a contract in your pipeline. It is just another opportunity by which there will be other contract opportunities. If you have a schedule, great, use eBuy and look into that and pull from there too. And that's something a lot of people don't do because it is a little clunkier. You have to have the RFQ number. Permalinks will disappear under your GSA schedule. So if you've seen something and you were like, I thought I saw this opportunity, it was active, I guess it's closed, it's not there anymore. Yes, that's real. That's GSA eBuy. So you should track manually that information in your pipeline. That's if you've been looking at it. Don't just count on it to live in cyberspace for you. Agency forecasts. I could not even tell you how many specific agencies have their own forecasts out there that they put out in a variety of different methods. That some are just lists, some are their own individual pipelines, just based on the agency. So look from there, pull that information all in your pipeline. NSA ARC has classified and unclass. And honestly, and this is going to hurt a lot of people, at Amber's last count, I think there was over 80-something sources where the government communicates contract opportunities with industry. That's 80, not 8, not 1, not one commercial firm, over 80. So that's the landscape that we're working in. And that's why building a pipeline is a cumbersome and clunky activity.
Right. And Lisa, I want to put that with a caveat, right? Because we're talking about today about the pipelines that sell to your, right, what Richard's looking at. So there are, yes, over 80 sources, right, for you to find opportunities in. And it's also how you define opportunity. It could be a lukewarm or a cold one where it's like GAO put out this review that these systems need to be corrected, right? And need to be fixed. And that could be an opportunity for a white paper. And that's kind of your long-term selling point, right? But when we're talking specifically about a pipeline, right, for when you're looking for someone to buy you like tomorrow, right? Those opportunities are ones where I'm assuming, Richard, right, you want to see ones that have, the movement, the link,
a number.
Right, a number with it, a solicitation number that's moving through. So when pipelines, right, are so important. I saw a comment, right, that said the pipelines really are. It could be your customers, your relationships, right, and your opportunities. Absolutely, right. However you define a pipeline, because opportunities in government contracting can come out of left field. They can come out of anywhere. They eventually have to be made into a contract, right? But, if you, as creative as you want to be, you can find a need. But when we're talking, Richard, right, you want to make sure you see solicitation numbers, right, and movement.
Yeah, and that way you could track it, and look in any of the background that you need to sort of vet it or what have you. So yeah, the more reference details, always the better, right? When you
absolutely
trust but verify kind of diligence efforts.
Very true. And Richard, actually, I don't remember if we talk about this in a little bit, but I want to make sure that we cover it. I alluded to before that a GWAC not necessarily belonging in your pipeline for M&A sake, for M&A diligence, because that doesn't do anything for you guys on that side. The task orders that would come out under it, yes, but just the general GWAC, not too helpful.
Yeah, and so once again, remember the audience. If you want to track that in a different way, because that's part of a strategy, obviously, and it's you're going after that hunting license to be able to have that entry point, right, to that beachhead to go after that other work. So once again, consider the audience. The pipeline that you show an external audience does not necessarily need to be the same one that you show internally. You would truncate data points but once again, I think it needs to be coherent enough for the folks internally to understand it, and then externally. I think if you consider audience, and there's things folks need to know or want to know, and things that's frankly not top of their priority list.
Great. And then after all is said and done, you will have to maintain your pipeline, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Now we are going to move into the anatomy of a good pipeline. So this is an example of fields that people like Richard would want to see. And apologies that we didn't get the text turned that way. There was an issue with what we were working with. But what it comes down to is these are some of the better fields that you could have from an M&A perspective. Does your pipeline have to have all of these? No. Are you able to fill in all of these 100% of the time? Also no. But from a perspective, this is what they would be looking for. So this includes the opportunity name, the status, the organization status, the federal entity, if there is a vehicle associated with it. The solicitation number is always hyper important. Any functional areas that you would meet under it, the NAICS code, the award type, whether it's single or multiple award, the competition type, and we can go into these a little bit in a second, the contract type, estimated projected contract value, and actual contract value. These are two different things. Amber, do you want to explain why they are different?
Absolutely. And Richard, I know when we were putting this together, we talked about the differences, right? And this is really, I think, a key component when you're looking at a pipeline, right? Is the ceiling is there, right? Say you want a task order that's worth 100 million, but knowing what is actually being performed or actually being provided and being executed, right, could be less than 100 million. Not every agency spends up to their cap, and even some spend over their cap, right? So knowing that is also important. But the estimated ceiling of what the government gives you and the actual, right, you want to make sure you're tracking because your ROI might be a little bit different. And Richard, right, is that probably one of the most weighted, most important aspects of the pipeline for you?
Yeah, once again, just consider if you will, the addressable market, right? And what is the contractual market for you, right? And that, it's not just, you take a percentage of the whole ceiling, right? And that's okay, that's yours. Because if you're doing P-wins and then you're doing calculations, basically, you could imagine you get higher numbers if you, and so you're inflating your pipeline if you're not, starting with that number that's more realistic.
Right. Inflating the pipeline may look really fun to you and your boss, but when it comes down to it, you might be in for a rude awakening, I would assume, if you ever meet with Richard. Right. So that's really important. Lisa, what are the other parts of the pipeline?
Yeah, so we also have the estimated final release date, the estimated award date, when it's going to start, and just the general period of performance. Dates are really important in a pipeline because you have to be able to stack, when things are due so that if you have the resources to go after these opportunities. If you have all 20 opportunities in your pipeline that all have an estimated final release date of May 2021, and you're a small firm, you're probably not going to be able to go after all of them. So you're going to have to prioritize what's worth the ROI because it is expensive to go after proposals, to go after contracts. And you have to make, a dedicated choice on whether it's worth the risk and the investment. From there, the period of performance, that's also extremely important. You got to be able to execute on the contract. And if you have limited resources, then you have to know when they are going to be actually working. If there's an incumbent vendor and that incumbent contract number and a link to the opportunity. And again, I feel so bad saying this. This does not mean the GovWin IQ link. This does not mean the BGov link. This does not mean the big link for your whatever system that you're using. This is the source link. Go in, always find the source. If you want to track both, that is fine. But please, for the love of everything, track the source link.
And I want to touch on, I saw we had a question about what do we recommend to build the pipeline on? And I don't want to spend too much time with this. We built this like an Excel sheet, right? Because if you don't want to spend any money, Excel is a perfectly fine tool. And there's things like Smartsheets, Pipedrive, things like that, using, your SharePoint site. Richard, have you seen any good CRM pipeline tools that stand out to you real quick?
Not for building pipelines. That for our purposes and what we've seen other folks, Excel is plenty good. It's never perfect, but it's as good as, I think it's good enough. And, it allows for that flexibility. I mean, you could spend a lot of time, effort, and money trying to build, sort of systems that would track this well. I've seen folks try to do in Salesforce. It's not ideal. I think, frankly, from Excel works just as good as anything else, and it's easier. Everybody knows how to use it, so it's one. I think if even recommend and it's easy for other folks to take a look at it and who outside the organization as well. So Excel is a universal language in many ways. So I would. It allows for that flexibility too.
Richard, I'm glad that you said that. We did not plant Richard to say that, but just a quick plug. The Pulse has actually created a scraping tool for our members that pulls opportunities from beta.sam.gov and grants.gov on 15-minute increments. And you can see it in a tabular format like this. And one thing that we really super wanted was the ability to export that to Excel because that's what's so usable. So we didn't even plant Richard to say that. But that is the way that Amber and I like to do it.
So Lisa, for the next slide, I'm seeing a lot of questions about PWIN and PGO and why that's not included in here, but we do have it on the next slide, right? About other things that you could include into your pipeline. And the reason that we didn't include PWIN or PGO is for a very specific reason. It's because every company formulates and tries to decide their PWIN based on every single different type of model, right? Or formula. Every company is different. We even asked Richard about this, and he basically was like, every company is different. We approach this differently every time. Because there is no one thing. We didn't want to put PWIN in there and convince everyone like, hey, you need to have this, right? But PWIN is absolutely an industry standard, depending on how you guys like to look at it. And Richard, you guys can see, things that we've listed here, all the different stuff, but just to touch on PWIN real quick, what is PWIN for the people that don't know, and why is it important to people such as yourselves?
It really is what is going to be the weighted average, if you will. That revenue, what your probability of winning it is. So if it's $10 million, if your probability is 50, okay, that's $5 million, and that allows you to build projections, and it allows you to build projections that are based off, to the extent that's the defensible P-win rate that you've chosen, and you could back it up with some degree of, support. It allows you to build. Probably most important, it allows you to build and plan for your projections and give you a sense of what those out-year revenues could look like.
So what is a P-win? Okay, because right, we were talking about P-win. You're like, I don't like to see this. If someone says I have a 50% chance, and you're like, well, how did you get there? And they're like, well, I don't know. I just kind of guessed, right? To me, P-win's always a little bit of a guess. What are the things, if you are asking someone to back up their P-win, what are the things you like to see included in that formula?
Sure, and like I said, it is subjective. It's always going to be subjective. There's no way to in a magic bullet way, sort of make something that's completely quantitatively solid, right? But it's got to have some reality. It's really a matter of an order of magnitude. Are you putting things in there that have a 10%? It's really why. Why is it 10? Maybe it's good to have a 10% P-win opportunities in there because but you're just being conservative, and why, right? But usually what people do, I've seen, is just throw 50 at everything. But once again, the elements that will have an impact, right? CPAR performance, past performance, subject to, Lisa hit on a little bit, subject to, resource constraints of the company, financial, manpower, all the rest, bid team. Do you have the bench? Do you have the clearances? Do you have the the ability to do the work if you get it, if you win it, right? So there's all these things that go into it, and people can weight them however they want. But once again, it's going to be a subjective number, and people are going to wonder if you have 100% in there, right? And versus 80. And I think what also has another impact, and it was kind of touched on, where they are. As a bid date, you're going to be much more certain where you're going to be in a P-win rate 2 months before the award date, or 30 days, whatever, than you are 6 months or 2 months, or some period that's, as you get closer to that award date, you should have a better sense of how you're gonna. And so as as those things get closer to win date, or award date rather, those numbers that might be sort of that band will start to narrow, the plus or minus, and you'll have a better, as you get closer to that date, those projections get better, right? And so long story short, it's going to be subjective. They get better over time because you have more information. You get a sense of, okay, who are they've down selected these groups. Okay, so we're not in that group. So now it's not 50 anymore. It's 0, right? We take it out completely. But it's it's subjective, but to the extent you could back it up. And remember, the audience too. You don't want to be too conservative because you want to create the best any kind of forecasting, right? You're not trying to game it for internal or external audiences based on the info you have. Realistically, what can the P rates you win for you're using externally should probably be the same ones you use internally, because you're going to plan. Your folks are going to see what's on the horizon. Your CFO and people in charge of the controller are going to look at, okay, this is what we can plan for. And I wouldn't necessarily be overly optimistic, but you don't have to be conservative to a fault either. And I think if you could back it up, and as you get closer to the award date, you're going to get a firmer sense how winnable it is.
Yeah, Richard, I think that's a good point. I would say, yes, beware the person that says we have 100% P-win on this. They're probably wrong. Just because the customer loves you. The customer doesn't love you. The customer loves their mama, probably. They tolerate you and like to work with you. So definitely that, and you're right, Amber and Richard, it is very subjective. So it's really just about your forecasting formula that you choose. So Richard, Amber, anything else that you want to touch on this other items that you could include in your pipeline?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Right, Richard. We had a comment here about someone also tracks the FTE count. I think that's really important, right? And I think the real difference that we're talking about, right, is internally, what are you tracking, and externally, what are you going to hand over to someone looking at your portfolio of your company, right? And to me, Richard, right, the FTEs may matter, but what do those FTEs translate as far as revenue, right? What does that look like? Because you could have 20 FTEs that are worth $5 an hour versus, one FTE that's worth $250 an hour, right? So tracking the FTEs, I think, is really important internally to know what you're going to have to deliver your staffing, right? But what you're really worried about is what do those FTEs cost, right? And how much are they going to make?
How do you bring them online? What's the one thing that, as long as any kind of revenue projections, and this isn't just government contract. Revenue just doesn't grow in itself. The costs grow proportionally with it. So you could assume and find a way to justify win rates of whatever we decide that they ought to be, but you need to be able to have corresponding costs grow proportionally based on those wins. Okay, so you win that, you're going to bring 20 FTEs on. Well, they're in San Antonio. So now you got to get background checks. You got to get them. You got to onboard them. And so you got to if you could capture the cost and the sort of logistical infrastructure needs, because those are resource constraints that will and they match with your pipeline. Then your pipeline makes strategic sense. If they don't, you could win all these things. It won't cost you anything. Well, that's not realistic, right? So that's just a consideration to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And Lisa, we have one more question. I know we're getting up on it. But this question I think is important. And Richard, real quick for you, how does someone answer the question, how much is in your pipeline from a dollar perspective, right? We talked about ceiling, we talked about actual. How does someone answer that, without really making up a whole bunch of BS?
Yeah, show your math. Once again, you have a version ready to show. Based on that weighted average number, based on your P-win, and they, and then, you could give a summary version. You don't have to show everything. It doesn't need to be open kimono right away, but come up with the number based on what you think realistically on a weighted average, based on what's in there. And but yeah, I wouldn't use the total number. I've seen folks do that. Try to do something on a percentage weighted, P-win rate weighted way, and then be ready to show the math. And like I said, maybe a truncated version of it, but it shows, these are the components of it, and this is how we get there.
Yeah. If you have CISP4 in your pipeline, don't say that your pipeline is worth $40 billion.
Yeah,
Stuff
I've
like
seen
that.
So don't do that. Yeah, that's not.
Please don't do that. Please don't do that. All right, guys. Well, we are coming up to the top of the hour, so we are just going to quickly summarize. Thankfully, we've actually covered this throughout the presentation. Key components and attributes of a well-articulated pipeline includes a coherent strategy with your company, needs to be easily understood. You have to be cost conscious of the costs associated with pursuing the work and have defensible P-win. When it comes to maintenance of your pipeline, just as important as developing it, you have to have a standardized process for inputting and updating information. You have to set your front of funnel, define stages of your sales cycle. Don't just let it be stagnant. A pipeline is a living, breathing organism that you work in. Don't just make it and then forget it. So keep all of it updated and accurate, and really truly execute regular pipeline reviews. So whether that's once a week or biweekly, depending on the size of your pipeline. But at the end of the day, a well-articulated, detailed pipeline highlights value and informs existing and future stakeholders on the strategic direction and growth of your organization. So it rationalizes your BD efforts. It offers strategic planning. It encourages your employee retention and culture. It can improve your projections, and it enhances your values. So if nothing else, make sure that you are always bidding with intent on any of the opportunities in your pipeline. That's what it's all about. Make sure that you are identifying federal clients and opportunities that are right fits for you in your organization based on your capabilities, your past performance, and your goals for the future. Make sure it's worth your return on investment, really and truly. So thank you so much Richard and Crossroads Capital. If you have any further questions for Richard, we have his information we can put in the chat. He will make sure that he has a list of everyone here as well. You'll be getting a follow-up in order to be able to touch base. Really, really appreciate that. We are the Pulse of GovCon. We hope that you have enjoyed this webinar presentation. And if there are any last-minute questions that we could potentially fit in, if you wanted to stay beyond the hour, feel free and we can stay on for another minute. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate
it. With the test negative, be positive, stay healthy. I like that, Bruce. That's nice. I like that.
That's literally all any of us can try to do.
Can hope for. Yeah, let's see if anyone has any last minute questions. We got Richard for like another 10 minutes.
All right. I think this was good. I think we were able to answer questions on the fly, and that's what we're all about. So be on the lookout for a replay version of this webinar. You will be getting the video as it happened, and look out for a joint blog post summarizing everything that we talked about today from the Pulse of GovCon and Crossroads Capital. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.